Hello and welcome back to the Dicebreaker podcast. This is episode 51. We're almost at a round year. We did actually work out just before this recording. It'll be next week. So happy birthday, Eve.
Happy to the penultimate birthday podcast.
Penultimate suggests that next week's will be the last. Like, we did a round year and that's it. We're out.
It will be the last chance for us to celebrate our first birthday as a podcast, yes.
True, yes. I'm Matt Jarvis. I'm the editor-in-chief of Dicebreaker. I am joined this week by two of the team and joined by Michael Wheels Whelan, head video for Dicebreaker. Hello, Wheels. How you doing?
Hello there. Thanks very much for having me. On this celebratory occasion, 1 week before our birthday, my partner has given me a haircut, so I've shaved part of my hair.
Wheels, I've also had a haircut.
No way.
Yeah, yesterday. My wife and I cut each other's hair, yeah.
Did you also sit in a bathtub?
No, we did it in the kitchen on a chair. But because we previously, when I had a haircut, my hair was very long. And for weeks afterwards, all of our clothes, I guess where we washed one of the towels, they just all had hair. So this time it was just like down to the waist, nothing, like covered in my own hair, and then having to tiptoe gently through to the bathroom to try and not just scatter it all over the carpet.
It's like that scene right towards the beginning of Malcolm in the Middle where he's just reading the newspaper butt naked as Lois shaves his entire body.
That's the kind of imagery you tune in for here on this board game about this board game about
turn
podcast.
that TV show on.
We're also joined by Alex Meehan. Hello, Meehan.
Yeah, I haven't had a haircut. I don't have
no butt naked Bryan Cranston for me, and let me tell you,
I don't have a wife to cut my hair, so and I don't want to try and cut my own hair. So I guess I'm just gonna turn into, I don't know, Cousin It from the Addams Family.
I would say that I feel very fortunate to. My wife is very good at cutting hair, and when I cut hers last time, I did not do a good job. Despite her instruction, it wasn't terrible. But she came back from work. She's a school teacher, and she was like, "Yeah, I realised that there's this just bit of hair that isn't long enough to go in my ponytail, but isn't short enough to look. So it just kind of dangles." I was like, "Oh, I'm really sorry."
When you got long hair, can't you just like grab it and go? You know?
No,
it doesn't work like that.
Never cut straight across. That's one thing. Always cut upwards to keep it feathered.
Yeah.
It's a complicated thing. I mean, I already had a lot of respect for those who deal with hairdressers and so on. But now a year of cutting our own hair or cutting each other's hair has only increased that respect.
Yeah. This is now a hair cutting podcast.
That's how we generate that fresh new content.
Yeah.
Get all those excited hairdressers in on. And the barbers, of course.
Yeah, I mean, someone's got to supply the hair for Loli's endless supply of wigs.
Exactly.
So here we are. We're here.
What you don't realise is that for our birthday, we've actually got something very special planned for both of you. We're going to be sending someone round to full body shave both of you.
Oh my god!
Look forward to
we're
this.
Combine all of that body hair into one wig.
Subscriber
content
on our next RPG episode.
Yeah, we're just going to have what looks like a scarecrow, but instead of straw, it's just hair. A haircrow.
It's like that scene in Hannibal.
We're here, if you couldn't tell, to talk about this week's board games and tabletop RPGs and whatnot.
We wouldn't blame you for not being able to tell.
Oh my God. Let's dive in. Meehan, let's start with you. What have you been playing recently?
Oh, what have I been playing? Well, it seems like in order to acquire some form of comfort, I've once again been falling back into old habits of playing both Six Nymph and Terraforming Mars. Two games that I've already talked about quite extensively on this podcast.
At length.
Yeah. So regular listeners and watchers will know that these two games that I enjoy and play a lot of. Newer individuals might want to know that our Terraforming Mars game lasted around 4 hours.
And this is on the app as well, so that's with a lot of the stuff handled for you, right?
Yeah, I don't know what and we started at like 1:30. Obviously, there was some, preamble involved with shenanigans stuff, trying to set it up because
it's just like the pre-match show.
yeah, exactly. The pre-match show containing us trying to work out why Asmodee Digital isn't allowing us to play with one another, and then getting into it, and then just like mucking about a bit, going off to get some snacks. I think a Sainsbury's order arrived and an Asda order arrived during the entire thing, so there was just a lot of interruptions. And I think we ended up finishing about 5:30, 6, something like that.
Not to the same house though, right?
No.
You're playing so
That's
long,
bougie.
multiple shops turning up.
Well, I like this own brand stuff from this shop. I like this own brand stuff from this shop. So I'm just going to order them both at the same night.
No, we somehow both coordinated our orders to come, both our households to come at exactly the same day and around the same time. But Terraforming Mars is the kind of game you can sort of leave and like go and do something else while you're playing. Because you can kind of pay attention, but the game sort of tells you what's been going on. I lost, so there's that. But it was very close. I was only 2 points behind the person ahead of me, and I think I was only like 5 points behind the person who won. So it was pretty dang close, and I don't know what happened. I think I just focused so much on getting all the money and like not really necessarily getting, points. It's a hard nut to crack sometimes. You got to figure out a strat and not just think, oh, what works well with my company? Let's just do that for a bit, and then, oh, hang on, wait a minute, I've got to actually do things to make sure I'm going to have points at the end. So, capitalism.
It is
great, yeah.
It distracts you from what really matters. So we did that, and then we played some 6 Nim in the week, just to hang out together. I think I did all right in that. It was fun. I think one game we played with like 10 people or something. It was wild.
Wow. Bloody hell.
Yeah, that was. The more people you add into that equation, the more that like luck and randomness starts to sort of take over, and there's a lot less strategy involved, and more like, oh god, how am I supposed to predict the actions of 9 other people? Funnily enough, you can't. You just gotta hope that you don't get terrible cards.
I mean, I can't even predict my own actions, so I don't know how I would even start with that.
Such
honestly.
a maverick.
I just don't play by the rules of society.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Will's on his skateboard. He's got his cat backwards. So yeah, that's all I've been playing really. Just same old. I have games I need to play, but sometimes the old favourites just can't help it.
Are you playing 6 Nim over tabletops then?
Board Game Arena.
Board Game
There's
Arena.
a really good version on Board Game Arena that just works really well and streamlines the whole process. And it just means you can just sort of sit there and laugh at other people's misfortunes while maybe having a drink during it. We've discussed this before. Wheels, what did we all play together last week?
We played a lovely game. All 3 of us, including Lolies, who's unfortunately not with us today. We played a bit of Inish, which is a game about ancient Irish clans clashing. It's not Clash of Clans.
No.
Clashing to become the High King or whatever it is. Basically, the Lord or High Lord of
all everything. Yeah.
So basically, the game is kind of part of like a 3-box run of games that Matago put out, and they're not necessarily designed by the same people, but they all have the same sort of philosophy of like big, colourful box set in like a mythological version of a part of the world and a part of history, and they're all about sort of like area control. So this one is probably the wackiest one of the 3 because it's the very most like. It's the least like straight and narrow war game out of all of them. because the other two are Cyclades, which is ancient Greek, which is basically a war game, but you have to like auction your moves. And then Comet, which is basically a war game, but you have like a tech tree. With Inish, like instead of being like, can you kill everyone and win by holding all the stuff, there's like 3 different win conditions. One where you have to hold a certain amount of land, one where you have to like rule over a certain amount of opposing players' pieces, and then one where you have to like be present in like places that have sanctuaries, which are essentially like churches. So like you're kind of, sort of just straddling the line between 3 different victory conditions at all times, trying to think like, okay, well, which one will I go for now? But like pretty much throughout the entire game, you are desperate to not get in a fight. Like getting in a fight is the worst thing that can happen to you. Because you just get absolutely annihilated on both sides, and it's such a thing of like, yeah, sure, you won, but you still lost half your men in the process, So it's very much like, how much can I get away with without kicking up a fuss and just sort of like coasting along without causing too many problems, without too many people looking at me and thinking I'm going to win, and then just like going for the run at the end, which Loli's did fantastically, and just sort of just ticked along, getting her provinces under her control, all that kind of thing, whilst we all bickered and squabbled in one region.
She wasn't interested in the petty disagreements that we all indulged in.
Yeah.
She sort of just went off on her own and explored the entirety of the island and then just conquered it. And then we were left there, with our toys thrown out of our hands.
Well, we had this thing, because the way that Inish works, there's a role called the Bren. And the Bren is in charge of a lot of important things, but is essentially decided by who is currently ruling the capital city. So the whole board is made up of different regions, so you'll get like the Highlands, or the Misty Lands, or the Forests, or the Salt Mines, which was a big funny one. But one of them has the capital city in it, which means that if you're the ruler of that, you become the Bren. I like to call it the caretaker manager, because you basically you're in control until the person who wins takes over. But Loli's was Bren from the start, and then just never stopped, because nobody ever challenged her for it. Because literally, next door, we were just having a 400-person fight for absolutely no benefit whatsoever.
Yeah.
There was just nothing to gain.
There was just this one area that we were all set on controlling, and it didn't really have an amazing benefit, but I think we were just all eyeing it up, except for Loli's, who really couldn't give a rat's fart.
I think it's because at some point we ended up with so many clans people in there as well that whoever would have ruled would have a good chance of getting the victory condition.
Yeah.
But because every time we had a fight, it was chewing
Everyone
through
died.
so many clan people.
Oh god.
Yeah,
we had a great time. We played on stream. We were getting towards the end of the stream. We were like, oh, I don't want to start playing. I want to see what happens. But we just managed to get it just in the 2-hour mark, which, considering the amount of crap we talk, is a pretty good time to play. I reckon it means it's quite a quick game. But yeah, it's a really great game, all about sort of drafting cards, and then the cards have the actions that you can play. So it's very much like one of those games where you can only do the things that are put in front of you, which takes away a lot of the sort of analysis paralysis you usually get with those kind of games, where you're just sort of oh, what do I do? What do I want to do this turn? Because if I do that, then I can do this, but I've got 4 actions, so I have to do this. Whereas with this, it's just okay, you need to play a card. When you play a card, you do what it says on the card, and it makes it so much easier for players to learn and all that kind of thing. It's a really, really great design, and really sort of very different from other things in the same genre, which is quite cool.
Yeah.
I thought
I'd never played before.
I thought the drafting element in that game is very interesting. It just makes it something entirely different.
It's very much one of those games where all the cards are good as well. So every time you pick something, you're passing along something. You're like, oh god, I wish I wasn't giving that to someone.
Yeah, and you can also see what you're potentially giving your opponents.
Yeah.
So you kind of have maybe a suspicion of what you think they're going to be able to do. Because you've already seen some of those cards. And it is about making those snap decisions while you're drafting. I enjoyed it. It's quite cutthroat, but
you have to be a bit conniving.
Yeah. Huh? What did you
I
say?
said, yes, it is, Meehan. It's
What's that?
very cutthroat.
You two had a real arms race, didn't you?
You came into
my
my
salt mines.
I was quite happy in my meadow, just looking at my tree.
I don't know why I have to go over this with you again.
Oh no!
You know exactly why I did what I did. Don't act innocent.
But yeah, apart from that, I have been playing quite a lot of the Arkham Horror living card game.
Yeah.
By Fantasy Flight, which is something we've recommended a lot. And to be honest, whilst I think it's a great game, and I'll recommend it very, very happily, I've never gotten out of the starter set. Like, I've always just played the starter set of a new person, and then that person, like, for whatever reason, hasn't carried on. So I've then introduced it to someone else, Finally, because my partner loves it, absolutely loves it. We couldn't stop playing it this weekend, so we ended up going to the board game shop in Brighton, Dice Saloon, and buying the Dunwich Legacy, which is
nice.
the first campaign box. And it took us a little while to understand how campaigns work in this game, but essentially there's things called cycles, which is, just like because it's kind of structured like a trading card game in the way that, what's the most recent Magic set? Legends of generic fantasy name. Or whatever.
I believe it's Coldheim was the most recent one.
Coldheim, for example, yeah. Here's a big box full of brand new cards, and you can get them, etc., etc. And based on the business model, it's either you buy 400 booster packs and hope you get them, or you can buy a box that has the same cards for everyone. This is one of those ones, the latter, where it's like you buy a box and it contains new characters you can play as, new cards that they can use, and then in this case it has 2 separate scenarios. But those 2 scenarios are part of like a 8 scenario campaign. So after you finish that box, you can then buy 6 blister packs, which are basically like another mission, another mission, another mission, and each one has like a couple of player cards in it as well. So you kind of like go through the story that way, and you can play the missions as much as you want. You can go back to them. So we started playing the box with 2 characters. I was playing this guy who plays a trumpet. He's very
I like him. Yeah, he's a good one.
He can summon the dead with his trumpet, which is very good. And I liked him, but he got absolutely annihilated in our Let's Play. So we're like, by the end of the 2 scenarios, we were like, we are so screwed. My partner was playing the Jenny, the dilettante, who's like, she's like this sort of like Southern Belle, but she's got like twin 45s, and she's very cool. So we ended up playing again. And we're like, okay, well, let's do it the other way around. Well, because you can choose which order you play them in. So we'll play the casino one first. We played new characters. For that time, I played as someone else. And we once again got absolutely destroyed. And we were like, what are we doing wrong? Should we put the difficulty down? Because we were playing on standard. Like, should we give ourselves the easier difficulty? And we looked at because in Arkham, you use like a bag of tokens rather than dice. So you're basically like constructing a 1 die in a bag. And you can add different sides to it by just putting a token in the bag. You could basically like see the odds for each difficulty level, and the easy one just seems so easy to the point where we're like, no, let's just give it one more go, and then probably be really upset if we lose. So I ended up playing a guy called Ashcan Pete, and let me tell you, folks, he's a legend. He is.
Is he the bootlegger?
No, he's like a sort of traveler. He's got like a dog. He's great. His main thing, he's one of the survivor characters, which are the red characters, and they're really good like all-rounders because they have loads of weapons, they've got equipment, they've got allies, they've got like they can do quite a lot of things. Like they can do a little bit of discovering, a little bit of fighting, a little bit of evading, which made him really useful. But his special power is he has a dog called Duke, and you can he doesn't start in your deck, he starts already in play, which is huge because he's like one of the better allies in the deck. And you can like exhaust him to either fight with him or investigate with him, which makes your stats like way better. And all of a sudden, when we actually had like 2 all-rounder characters rather than being like, I'll do all of the investigating, you do all of the fighting, we always ended up where it was like, cool, the investigating character has got 4 enemies trying to kill them, and the fighter person can't do any of the clues because they can't get around and do it. Once we actually got a little bit more of a balance, we just crushed it. Like, went through both scenarios, didn't take any trauma, got the best endings on both of them. We were like, all right, cool. now it's time to move on to the blister packs. But yeah, so we're going to be playing a lot of the blister packs. I might, every time I come on the podcast, to do a little update from Arkham of what's been going on in our campaign.
It's the Arkham update.
News from over the Atlantic.
One of the things that I like about Arkham Horror, because my wife and I play a lot of Mansions of Madness. It's maybe like our favorite game. Maybe it's certainly our most played game. I'd say like every time they put out an expansion. Yeah,
like
and it's
miniatures and app rather than cards.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing is like I'm as sick of Lovecraft games as anybody else, and like Lovecraft, massive racist, anti-Semite, a lot of horrible things. But I do think Arkham Horror Files, the universe, does a good job of separating out the bits that are interesting about the Cthulhu mythos, but also building up their own series of characters. Yeah. And it's those characters that I find my like interest is it like the monsters, a thrall turns up and it's a thrall and there's a deep one and stuff like that. But they're just kind of generic fodder. But I found myself over, because we've played Eldritch, Arkham Horror, the Living Card Game, the Mansions of Madness, Elder Dice, and you do find yourself being like, oh, I actually really do like this character, and I find myself always going back to Diana, the reformed cultist.
Yeah, I like her.
Yeah, and like my wife always plays I think it's the cop with a shotgun, mainly just because she likes
Roland, the Fed.
Oh, maybe it's not then. It's the guy. He starts with like a particular shotgun. It's got a name like
I'm not sure.
Betty or something.
There's a lot of characters now. Like there's quite a big sort of like roster. And like, in fairness, like they're super diverse. Like there's a lot of people of color. There's a lot of like even gender splits and like it's genuinely. And one of the best things is that especially playing with my partner who is identifies as a woman is like there is a lot of very, very strong female characters as well, which is something that was a lot easier to sort of like introduce her to the universe rather than just being like, cool, yeah, all the strong buff dudes and then like the women who need help. It's like it's not like that at all, really. Like you've got like equally sort of like brainy, punchy, fast characters across the spectrum, and it's like they're all really like diverse and from different backgrounds and are just sort of interesting because of their character and not because of any kind of superficial crap.
Yeah, I think the Arkham Files universe, as they call it.
Arkham Files Endgame.
Yeah. It's got a big potential to kind of be very bloated, and I guess you could argue already is quite bloated, particularly with the frequent Arkham Horror card game releases. I know Mansions of Madness get like regular expansions. I'd say like Eldritch and Arkham are a little less so, because I think they don't tend to release as many expansions for those two games. Same with Elder Sign. But I've played I think I've played all of them now, except for maybe Arkham Horror. And I like all of them for different reasons. I mean, I would say I like some of them more than others. I think Eldritch Horror, again, is just such a really good game, and like I want to own a copy of that now because it's just a great experience. And yeah, like you two have said, it's got elements of Cthulhu mythos without all the gross stuff. And the characters are very compelling. You become very attached to them, mostly because you have adventures with them. Like you go through all these like really well written scenarios, that and the various actions you perform will have some very serious consequences in the game. It's not afraid to throw punches. And Arkham Horror, the card game, is one that I definitely want to try more. I think I've only played it a few times, and I really enjoyed it. I really like the concept of it. It's definitely one I want to give a go. It's just like finding people to play with and getting started with the right starter packs and campaigns and things. So
I will say that for anyone listening who's thinking of getting into it and doesn't have like someone around to play with, which is a pretty common thing right now because of the pandemic, it works really well solo as well. Like it's a co-op game, so as you'd expect, it works well solo. But also it's like just as interesting to play with one person as a group, I think, and to the point where it's kind of built for smaller groups, I think, because when you buy the base set, you either play it with one or two. You can play with four, but you need to buy another base set on top of that. So to like have just one or two people playing is kind of a bit of a cheaper, but also like a bit more sort of like designed to be played like that kind of thing.
I mean, you could always sort of band together with a group to buy like the starter set and some campaigns or something, because it is a co-op game, and it is again a lot more beneficial, I think, to play with the same people on a regular basis, because you grow attached to those characters and the party that you formed and the stories that they experience along the way. So that's an option.
And it gives you that sort of like deck building feel, but it's not like one thing that I get with like deck building trading card games is like you build a deck and then you lose with it 100 times, and then like maybe you'll get something good out of it a while after you've like refined it. Whereas with Arkham, like you build your deck to start with, and you might really not know what you're doing with it, but then like you start, because basically in between each campaign session, you get experience points that you can then spend on upgrading and adding to your deck and swapping it around. So you're encouraged to constantly just sort of like tinker around with it. But each of those cards serve a purpose regardless of whether or not you want the flavor text, because they've got like this kind of system where you can spend a card and every single card has a little icon on the left side which will improve your odds at a skill test. So even if you've got loads of cards that don't really work, you can still at the very least make your stats better, and then you can start thinking about what doesn't work, what does, start twisting things around, maybe try a new character, and it really like incentivizes you to be like experimental in between each session, whilst also giving you that sort of sense of progression, where it's not just like, here's my deck and I finally made it work, which doesn't really mean anything right now because I'm just sort of like beating my friends or beating people online. Whereas with this, it's like, oh, I finally got my deck to work. Now I'm feeling a lot more confident as we go on through each adventure, and like it feels like your character's grown kind of thing, and have gotten a bit more like handy in the situation. Yeah, it's a really good game, and I'm looking forward to playing a lot more of it because it's really cool. I haven't even talked about the casino level and how smart that is, because it has like a sort of social stealth thing, which is really cool. Yeah. Anyway, there you go.
Very good. Yeah, I think I'm with you. Like, I don't care for deck construction games, as in I don't care for the deck construction bit of games like Magic. Like partly because I just don't have the time to dedicate to learning the meta and sitting there for however long building up a deck. Arkham Horror, the card game, has been one of the few where, like you say, because you can start with a fixed deck and then it's like, okay, like you say, you can just swap out one or two cards after each scenario, and it's more of like a leveling kind of system than it is. Yeah. It's not like, oh, I need to build around the meta or I need to like counter things. It's good. It's a great game.
Because like I'm very much in the same camp, whereas like I'm not necessarily a big fan of spending ages deck building, but it's got so many things that just sort of help you out. Where it's like, you want to play a blue character, you can just grab all the blue cards that come in the starter set and a couple from the new box, shove some neutral cards on top, and then you're golden. Like that will be like a relatively good set, and then you can just like play with them, figure out what you don't like, and just get rid of them. But what I also love is that like you have like a limited pool of cards as well. So I was sat there, like we were building decks next to each other, me and my partner, and we were arguing over, no, I want that card. No, you can't. There's only two of those. You can't have both of them. Which is a really like fun little bit of stupidity as well. But yeah, Matt, what have you been playing? I've been talking for hours.
Speaking of hours, I didn't play Terraforming Mars with Meehan because I was instead playing Forgotten Waters with some friends who wanted to give it a go. And we actually played using the Remote Assistant app. So I spoke about Forgotten Waters, I think, last week. It's the pirate game from Plaid Hat, who did Dead of Winter. Combines a companion app with a storybook, a flip book, and a board. And individual player sheets, which are all unique, and you fill them in. It's a really interesting game. It's a really good game. Previously, my wife and I had just played it, the two of us, using the two-player variant, which is solid. With more people, there's more of the infamy track, which is where you are kind of jostling to be the most famous pirate, even though you're all working together on the ship to survive and not sink and so on. You also might screw over each other or steal someone else's treasure, because you're a pirate. It's what you do. So we played with 5 of us, using the remote assistant, which is free. Is you run it alongside the companion app, so it basically replaces a lot of the boards you have on the table. So instead of having trackers for infamy and ship hull and crew and stuff like that, you just have this app and it shows it on the screen and everyone can join and see it. The only bit that you still have to have out is really the board with the ship on, which you don't use loads anyway. So you still have to have a physical copy. So my wife and I had obviously played before. The other 3 players had never played Forgotten Waters. The experience was really good. It was a really kind of slick experience. We played for, I think it was like 3 hours in the end. And that was enough to get through the first half of a scenario. But that wasn't because the app was necessarily slowing us down. It probably took a little longer than it usually would. But that was just, I think, the length of we sailed around for a little bit and we didn't go direct to where we needed to go. But the remote assistant app I think it's a really good example of how you can offer something that lets you play a physical board game over the internet, basically. Like, we pointed a webcam at the shipboard on our end, but then we just looped in Discord. So I shared our screen, which had the companion app, so all the audio narration looped through as well, so they could all hear that. It was really smooth. It went really well. We had a really fun time. There are a lot of player sheets. They're all different. So, for instance, I was Boots McDecker, the grifter, I think, and someone else was something else. You'll have different kind of like the something. You have your little unique story. One of our friends was a skeleton, and the writing for the skeleton is incredible because it's just like the skeleton doesn't believe that it's a skeleton. So it's cases where it's like, I reached up to touch my skin, or someone reached to touch my skin and they were like, oh, there's no skin here. It was like, oh, it's because of something else. It's not because I'm a magically animated skeleton. And it's just like this recurring punchline of that exact phrase, like magically animated skeleton. And it's really good. Like, the writing in that game is genuinely it's really strong. It's very funny. We'd actually said the DLC came out last Friday, the first bit of DLC for it, Kraken's Eye. So that adds a scenario which we didn't play, but it also adds in like 100 extra events to the randomized companion app. So I can't tell which ones were new and which ones weren't. They just kind of pop up, but that game just continues to be really good fun. Like, the hours kind of flew by. We were just sailing around. We went to an island. We were kind of squabbling among each other over infamy and treasure and things like that. Like, again, like all the treasure cards is like you can get a big old wheel of cheese. So at one point we needed the ship to go faster, so we had to throw the wheel of cheese overboard.
Oh no!
And it's those little stories like that. It does a really good job of just like basically handing you a load of stuff and going like, okay, go sail around. Here's the objective you're trying to get to. Here's this island. But on the way, you'll encounter a dozen smaller things. So like we had a fight with a ship at one point. There was something involving a parrot. Those kinds of just little moments that are all thrown up by the app, and also just us kind of squabbling amongst each other over infamy or stealing treasure off each other. It's really good. I'm really, really enjoying it. I think I really, really loved Pandemic Legacy Season 0. If I had played this last year, this may have been my favourite game of last year. It's really good. It's really, really good.
Wowzers.
So yeah.
Considering that I've now learnt that my partner loves story-based co-op games, that might be the next thing on the list.
That is it. Like, the actual gameplay is light. There's a little bit of you pick actions when you go to a location and you get supplies and you fix the ship and you have kind of like cannon battles of stuff. But most of it is the story stuff. It's, you go somewhere, you make a decision. So it's like, we went into a hut at one point and it's like there was an old woman who charged at us with a knife and someone cut her down.
Whoa!
And the writing is like, oh no, like we slew an innocent old lady, And then it's like, and then you look in the cupboard and there are a load of human bones and a book on how to like butcher a human. And the voiceover's like, oh well, never mind. It's kind of like dark, and it also does a good job of we had multiple fights, and there was like a recurring joke about we slew a particular pirate called Little Gay in one of the fights, and there's this whole thing about the crew, the like enemy crew, being distraught and like chanting Little Gertie's name, which is funny by itself. And then multiple fights later, you fight someone else who was dressed like Little Gertie, and it turns out to be someone like that had been on that crew and is now kind of like trying to redeem their name and things like this. It's all little things like that just, it does a really good job of just feeling very fun, and the tone is silly but not like shallow. So I continue to love Forgotten Waters. My wife and I played a bit more MicroMacro, Crime City. A couple of the cases we did, there are a couple of just slightly more like elements of the crimes and the characters that are a shame in a game that is otherwise fantastic. So for those who don't remember, MicroMacro is like Where's Wally meets Sherlock Holmes Consultant Detective. You solve crimes by looking for a big old map, poster-sized map. And yeah, there were just a couple of things where you go like, not sure about that. Yeah. Kind of just like slightly off taste. Luckily, they're not, at least the ones we've encountered so far, I think we're about halfway through the cases. They're not so problematic that it kind of puts off completely, but it was that thing of just like, it just, you don't like to see it in a game that is otherwise really good fun.
Yeah, and it's a shame.
Yeah.
I'm kind of cursing my postman at the moment because I've like got a copy on order to possibly do a review for the channel, something like that, but it's not here yet, and I want it now.
Yeah, it's real good. And then finally, this is not a game, and I'll be quick on this because we're running over, but my wife and I have started watching an anime called After School Dice Club, which I just wanted to mention because we started watching it because
you already took up the whole morning meeting talking about anime, Mr. Jarvis.
I didn't. Look, I was provoked. But
I swear, Judge, they provoke me.
We finished Haiku, which is excellent. It's one of the best shows I've ever watched. You should all watch Haiku, but it's about volleyball, not board games, so I won't talk about it anymore. After School Dice Club it's a really interesting anime where it's about a group of kids that get together to play board games. But the interesting thing about it is that the board games are all real board games. Oh, right. So each episode is just like, the first episode has Marrakesh, and they'll just run through the rules. So it's almost like watching a rules tutorial in the middle of an anime.
That's amazing, to be
The
fair.
second one is about, not Six Nimmt, it's about, what is it? Oh, Cockroach Poker.
Cockroach Poker,
so
yeah.
they'll just be like, here's how you play Cockroach Poker, and all the art is Cockroach Poker, and the boxes are the actual boxes, which kind of look a little bit out of place sometimes versus the anime kind of style of everything else, because obviously the board games are all distinctive different art styles.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. I would say that the rest of the show, it's a bit like, meh. I don't particularly care for the characters so far. Like, the main character is just a bit of a wet sponge that just exists to walk from place to place and then be like, show me a game now. And it's just a bit...
I wonder how that works. Like, I wonder if...
I was wondering about the licensing.
Yeah, because it's the classic anime joke of anime joke of like, oh, I'm drinking my Pepsi, like
Pepsi.
I went to McDonald's or something. But I think it kind of reminds me of Semi-Co-op do like. So Semi-Co-op are like a web comic all about board games, and they have like a sort of like, I don't know if I think they do sort of like sponsored comics where they'll do their kind of joke format, but also sort of teach you how to play the board game as well. So like there was one that was for Undaunted, for example. You got the characters in like sort of World War II garb and stuff like that, and it's like, I wonder if they've got like a sort of
agreement,
like direct line of communication with the people making the board games and be like,
yeah.
Like, could a board game sponsor this anime to make an episode about it?
It was interesting because, so at one point they walk into like a board game shop and there just are loads, like my wife and I kind of almost paused it to just look at all the things on the shelf, could be like, oh, there's this and this and this. But they do mention at one point they're discussing trading card games and they flash up cards that are not Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh! And I think like the third one looked like the Final Fantasy trading card game, but it wasn't. but they were very clearly.
Oh, they were lookalikes. Okay.
Yeah.
They've got the license for some things.
Yeah, they're
but...
big brands though, right? Like
That's what
especially
I'm
Yu-Gi-Oh,
wondering,
which
yeah.
has its own anime, would
Whereas-
surely be like no.
Yeah, something like Cockroach Poker, you can imagine the creators of the show being able to get that because it essentially just promotes because here's a group of people having fun and playing this game
and teaching you how to play. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Like I say, I don't think it's a great. I don't particularly love slice of life anime, which is basically just people doing tedious things and living their lives. But it's
Matt, that's this podcast.
I'm watching it solely to be like, oh, that's interesting to see what game pops up and what they say about it. But I think all the surrounding story I'm not invested in at all. Sorry, After School Dice Club.
Yeah, I'm sure they're devastated.
Yeah, go watch.
Is that on like Crunchyroll or?
I think it's Funimation, which isn't a great platform for anime anyway, because their player is terrible. It's really bad, but it's where it's available. So
Well,
there you go. If you're interested in an anime about board games, I think there's only 12 episodes. I don't think it has a second season, as far as I know. We're only a couple of episodes in. It might pick up, but so far it's just kind of like, it just kind of trundles along. Like the story so far is people go play board games, and then there was a slightly funny thing about one of them having a crush on the other one, as is the way.
Oh.
And trying to throw the game deliberately so that they won and accidentally eliminating them. That was slightly more interesting, but yeah. If you do want a good anime, go watch Heaven's Design
right,
Team.
Matt, let's news.
Heaven's
Matt,
Design
stop
Team.
it,
Yeah.
stop it.
Okay.
Matt, we're going over. You can't turn.
You're allowed to do complete tangents as long as it's not anime.
Okay, let's move on to news.
Naked Danny DeVito's or Bryan Cranston's, that's fine.
Yeah.
This is mutiny. Okay, let's move on to news because we are running over. Let's get through these quick. Okay, top of the news list. Gen Con has been delayed.
Makes sense.
So Gen Con normally takes place in August. Of course, last year replaced by Gen Con Online for the obvious reasons. Was originally scheduled to return in a physical event this August, but it's now been delayed to September, kind of 16th to the 19th, so mid-September. And interestingly, they're holding a physical event, but they are also capping the number of people that can attend it and holding Gen Con Online again at the same time, and also introducing a new kind of strand, which they're calling Pop-Up Gen Con, which is an interesting kind of initiative where they bill it as the demos that you would play at Gen Con of new games that are coming out. They're planning to bring those to various local game stores. So instead of traveling all the way to Indiana, you could presumably go to your local game store. They would have one of the demos or several of the demos that you would see in person at Gen Con and be able to play them there instead, which I think is interesting. And obviously the online component will be much the same as it was last year, so panels and things like that. And then there will be a capped physical show, so kind of greatly reduced because of various health and safety guidelines. So yeah, it is back, but in a very different form to previously.
I mean, they're adapting in response to all of this. So, it sounds interesting. It'd be... Yeah, let's see whether they spread themselves too thin. I don't know whether that's going to be a concern. The online thing is interesting. I wonder whether a lot of conventions are just going to continue doing something similar, even when things do become a lot safer for larger groups of people. Just because I don't think it opens things up to people who can't afford to travel all the way to these places and stay there, etc. Obviously a big appeal of the convention has been able to go to physically to the place and play games with other people and stuff like that. So, but not everyone has that luxury, so it might be good for them to use some of the online platforms that we have available to allow people to actually experience those games.
Do you think it's Gen Con Online, I think, had a kind of mixed reception. I think it's been a struggle for like any tabletop event to really kind of capture the spirit of being there in person. That's the appeal of those events. You go there, you sit around a table together. So I think actually this pop-up initiative is a smart way of finding that balance. And actually, like you say, being a lot more accessible, even without the surrounding situation of COVID. Like, I think in some ways this is a really good idea.
Yeah.
We've kind of seen similar things in the past. I think International Tabletop Day tried to do something similar. I might be wrong. And I don't think it particularly took off in the way that they hoped. And other things like Free RPG Day are relatively kind of small.
Yeah.
But I think actually there's definitely something to be said for Indiana. Like, a lot of people can't attend from the US or outside of the US. So this is a good way of making use of, you know, the spread of local game shops, supporting local game shops and getting people through the doors there. And kind of having that same feeling of getting around a table, but not having to travel hundreds of miles and cram into a room with, you know, tens of thousands of people, which for many folks, even without the health and safety stuff at the moment, isn't something they might want to do. So it'll be interesting. I hope this takes off and this becomes more of a norm, this kind of, you know, we're making these demos widely accessible for people to play in person, whether it's digitally, whether it's in person at friendly local game stores. Because I think more accessibility in the hobby is never a bad thing, and giving people the chance to play things for themselves is a good thing.
Yeah, agreed.
Cool. All right, let's move on to the next one as we rush through. Z-Man, publisher of Pandemic, etc., not publisher of the Euro Classics line, which it's announced it's ending. So for those who don't know, Z-Man, part of Asmodee, the massive board game giant that also owns places like Fantasy Flight and so on. Z-Man, probably best known for Pandemic, I'd say. Also does Carcassonne, picked up Love Letter, which was originally published by Orderac. And it did have a line of Euro Classics, which it released 5 titles under that kind of name, which were all kind of older titles that they gave a bit of a visual overhaul, tightened up a few of the rules, I think. Coincidentally, the first 5 and the only 5 now Euro Classics were all Reiner Knizia games.
Hey!
I was about to say, it was basically the let's make a prettier version of Reiner Knizia games line, wasn't it?
Yeah, so there was Taj Mahal, Samurai, Ra, Through the Desert, and Tigris and Euphrates. Tigris and Euphrates. So great games like Ra and Tigris and Euphrates, particularly, like absolute classics. And from what I've heard, those versions are decent. I think some folks griped a little about the component changes, but I think it made the games, you know, like a bit more accessible. I know that some folks didn't like the price point.
Well,
I've got the Ra copy from that line, and yeah, it was pretty spenny. I think it was like 45 quid or something, which, considering it's basically just an auction game with tiles, like there was a bit of a sort of like upscale of the cost. It felt a bit sort of not gentrified, but you know.
Yeah, I think it was kind of it felt like they were probably leaning into the trend of board games being more impressive in terms of components and being able to come in at that higher point.
They did look very pretty. I don't know if the components were all that much to shout about necessarily, considering they were going for that sort of like luxury board game brand line sort of thing. But what's confusing is this quote where it says, "Z-Man is no longer an indie publisher. We have many existing obligations, like supporting our 4 major game brands of Pandemic, Carcassonne, Love Letter, and Citadels." Which, I mean, usually when people are no longer indie game brands, they do more things. But
yeah, and I would say that Z-Man has long been in the kind of upper echelon of like quote small public. I mean, it publishes Pandemic, and Pandemic's been out 13 years now, and Pandemic has been huge for over a decade.
They've been milking that brand for like a decent amount.
Squeezing that good green milk out of it.
Yeah, they've been squeezing those udders. Like, it's not like this is a new thing that they're suddenly doing and they're saying to everyone. I would say the Euro Classics line probably isn't something that an indie publisher would do, because an indie publisher would probably just make their own new games rather than, re-release existing older ones.
Yeah, so Steve Kimball, who's the head of studio over there, he added some other kind of indications of why they're making this move. So he mentions Kickstarter, and that often being kind of a route for many publishers to bring out reprints like this, because you obviously go to people who are directly interested. Also mentions kind of the changing industry as a whole, the board game industry. Mentions kind of took a shot at Shut Up and Sit Down, particularly saying that you need to pray that any number of witty UK board game influencers take notice and give you coverage.
Maybe they were talking about us, Matt.
No, we're not witty. Don't worry about it.
There was some particular phrasing around a recent Shut Up and Sit Down video, and Shut Up and Sit Down then responded on Twitter. But there's also, they mentioned the fact that so many games come out now, and the Board Game Geek top 10 or top 100 rankings kind of indicated that it's not necessarily what is the best of all time, it's more just kind of what's hot right now. So said, nowadays there's so much noise that it's nearly impossible to ensure that your wares are seen, heard, and given a fair chance to succeed in the market. Amazing what a difference 50,000 games in 15 years has on the communal perception of GOAT.
The thing is, right, they're sat here, and again, this is not a reflection of what Dicebreaker, thinks, or I don't know what's going through the heads of Zedman Games, executive and whatever, but, they're sat there going, oh, whoa, we've had to cancel this Euro Classic line because we're having to focus on the things that, get us more money and everything. I mean, number one, obviously for my job, I tend to know about board games that a lot of, other people probably wouldn't know about. But Tigris and Euphrates is definitely a game that has popped up many times in, the research I've done, whatever. It's not exactly some underground sort of title. Again, amongst tabletop enthusiasts, I just feel that, there are certain games that deserve to have reprints and, deserve to be, experienced by people who might not have heard of them or seen them before. But I feel like you just have to be pickier with those. Just like choosing a load of Rhino Knizia games. Again, no offense to Knizia, but he's made a lot of games. Not all of them are especially, worthwhile pursuing. So, in a market where more and more people are releasing more and more stuff, doing something like this isn't so viable. Don't worry, Zedman Games. I'm sure you'll be fine.
Yeah, I suspect that this comes as a result of those games just not having, they're popular in the hobby, the hobbyist end of things. But probably compared to Pandemic or Carcassonne, those kind of mainstream breakthroughs, right? It is almost certainly a fraction of what those sell, because once you get through that kind of, once you break into the mainstream, things are probably magnitudes larger to a point where appealing to, I don't know, a tenth, 100th, whatever the difference may be in those audiences, it probably just doesn't become viable. Even if they're great games, like you say, it's just, it's worth just kind of cutting your losses, which is devastating, really, because, you think of how many fantastic games there are like this that may never see print again, or have to rely on a Kickstarter, which, doesn't mean that they're accessible to people necessarily, because sometimes they come in at a higher price point because of premium components, they're limited to the Kickstarter, whatever it may be. But, you can kind of see why they're doing this from a cold, hard business standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm not thrilled by the idea that, publishers are now just sticking to the stuff that they think is safe and just keep milking those. But if they're going to take risks, I'd rather they just take risks by hiring new designers who deserve to be hired, and making definitely new exciting games that aren't a bunch of, again, no offense to the type of game or Knizia's work, but I'd rather they just hire people to make new exciting games with themes and mechanics that we might not have seen before than re-release a load of old Euro games.
Well, yeah, this. So you kind of brought up what I was planning to say as well, Meehan, where it's there's there's no point sitting here saying, oh, well, the industry just doesn't support this kind of work, so we're going to have to just make Pandemic again. It's like, well, no. Like, what you've done is you've taken some very old games that were popular, as you said, Matt, within a niche crowd. You've made them extremely expensive for people to purchase, and they haven't sold well, and now you're, like...
I guess
shade an indie YouTube channel. Like I don't really know what like you're trying to achieve here. Like also I'm pretty sure that Shuffles It Down did reviews of like at least 2 of those Euro Classic lines, and it's like and I mean part of that is the fact that the media landscape is changing as well. Like there's way more different board game reviewers than there were at the time when this probably launched. I mean, not to mention, we've turned up as well, which is good. But like, there's like a very, very different zone now where people can learn about new and exciting games. So to say, oh, hey, we've done a reprint of something that was like middlingly popular, is not really going to be that exciting to people. And I think to cast shade because your like business idea didn't work seems a little bit unprofessional to me, but I don't know. It's a bit of a throwaway line, so sort of like
and it's worth saying that so Zedman kind of revealed some of the images of Princes of Florence, which was meant to be the 6th title, and the first non-Knizia title because it's by Wolfgang Kramer, and they revealed some of the art, which was I think nearly finished, but they have said that they'll be returning the license for that game to Kramer. So they basically said, if another publisher wants to do a Kickstarter for it. So in fairness to them, they've said basically it's not for us, but we're not stopping. We're not going to hold on to this IP or something like that. That would be 100 times worse.
Oh no, we've seen that. Yeah. We've seen that happen, and it sucks because obviously there are games that we would all like to see a reprint of. There's a video of that on the YouTube channel.
There is. Yeah. Thank you, Meehan.
That's very good. But, those are our kind of personal preferences in terms of, like, some of those games aren't necessarily what people want or need at the moment. And, yeah, I'm definitely of the opinion, like, if you've got money, Zedman, to make risks, to put yourself out there, try hiring some designers that aren't Reiner Knizia and Kramer, because they're doing fine. I'm looking at people who deserve to have more of a platform, who deserve to have, someone take a chance on them. So do that. Just listen to what I'm telling you to do and do it.
Business analyst Alex Meehan is just giving you this free information.
I have a bank account.
It's also just the fact that, like, they put out boxes where it's just the classic, like, here's the title of the game with a person from the era, and it's just like I don't think they're really innovating in a way where it's like, I mean, Pandemic's great and they've gotten a lot out of it, but it's only going to last so long. Like you'll have like the the carrying on long tail of Pandemic, bog standard edition just selling again and again and again. But I think, Pandemic Season 0 was supposed to be the final one, right? So
yeah. Legacy is done, yeah.
Yeah, so it's, there's only so much life out of those titles, and eventually you need to start making new things, otherwise you are just going to be just sort of like caught in the stream of publishers that don't do anything anymore,
Yeah, and I mean, we don't know. It's like maybe they launch something completely original out of the back of this, and that's where that energy's going. And if so, fantastic.
We're all down for that.
Yeah, like definitely the phrasing of it, like you say that quote where it's like we're focusing on these 4 things that are already long established, and it's like okay.
To say, we're putting all of our effort into the things that essentially run themselves.
Yeah. All right, on to the next one. This is a very quick one. Steamforged, known to you and I from the Dark Souls board game, Resident Evil 2 board game, Horizon Zero Dawn, as well as original stuff like Bard Song and Guild Ball. They've announced or teased a Sonic the Hedgehog card game and a Sea of Thieves project, which we don't know what it is yet. We don't know if it's a board game, a card game. It probably won't be a tabletop RPG because that's not what Steamforged do, and there's one of those already.
Right? Yeah.
But they teased, so Sonic the card game, I believe is the name of it.
Woo!
Sonic's the name and Speed is the game. Literally. Join the beloved Blue Blur in a competitive card racing game where you'll collect power-ups and rings to win, is the description.
It's not licensed after the Burger franchise, then.
Matt Jarvis, I love you so much for reading out.
Sonic's the name and Speed is the game.
Literally. JML presents Sonic. We don't know loads about this. They've just teased it, I think, as part of the Gamma Expo that took place. Presumably, it'll be one of those. It will do what it will do.
One of those.
Steamforged is no stranger to licensed games at this point. Some of them have been good, some of them have been bad. The recent ones, I believe, have been... Well, Resident Evil 2 was good. I hear bad things about Horizon Zero Dawn, but I've not played it myself, so...
I think, with Steamforged, to be fair, a lot of board game companies have been hit really hard by the pandemic. So if they are just kind of falling back on video game franchises for a little bit, that's probably fair enough.
They did Bard Song relatively recently, didn't they? So it's not like
next year?
They're just firing out.
That is one of those games, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
One of those Kickstarter games. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. The ones that we slag off.
Dungeon crawler.
Sorry, Mean.
No, Sonic. The Sonic's in it.
And also, it's worth saying there have been Sonic board games already.
Yeah.
There was Crash Course, I think.
Yeah, I think there was that one.
And I think there was another one, so we'll see what this is. Maybe it's based on the film, because obviously the film came out recently, so maybe it's got Jim Carrey as Eggman.
I'd like that.
Who knows? Maybe it's a Mean Bean Machine card game.
Whoa! Callback. Yeah.
Meanwhile, Sea of Thieves just had a teaser image, which had some suitably pirate stuff, like a treasure chest and some gold and stuff. Had a little riddle. With golden teasers we are bidden, but this secret shall remain hidden. Treasure galore you shall receive if you can brave the sea of ...
Oh.
Can you guess what goes here?
Maybe they looked at Forgotten Waters and were like, hey, people like this. Maybe we should...
People like pirates, huh?
Maybe we should do something similar.
Rest in peace. This is what Johnny talked about a lot. So I wish there were more good pirate games.
Not dead!
He's just dead to us. No. We love you, Johnny. We miss you.
Friend of the channel and corpse, Johnny Chiodini.
But yeah, I mean, again, we don't know anything about the Sea of Thieves board game. We don't know when it's coming out.
Don't
it could be
email
this year, it could be next year.
us.
Presumably it'll be, judging on previous Steamforged things, I would suspect there'll be a Kickstarter involved at some point. Tis the way for
probably.
video game board games. And presumably make a load of money, and a lot of people buy it, and it will have miniatures, and those people may or may not be pleased when it eventually turns up. Let's move on. Next one, getting through these. There is a battle royale board game set in the world of Infinity, the sci-fi miniatures game from Corvus Belli. So it appears to be called Infinity Deathmatch : Tag Raid. Tag is all in caps, so I don't know if that stands for something.
Tag is their mechs. That's what their mech is called in Infinity. Which, I mean, you should know about getting in the robot, should you, Matt? Considering how you've been painting your army up.
Yeah, that's true. I should know that. I've not played Infinity yet, but I have been slowly painting them.
Listen, we can finally get back in the office. We will play Infinity. It will happen.
And maybe by then we'll play this. Maybe. It is coming to crowdfunding in this autumn. And it's described as being a multiplayer battle royale survival game set in the Infinity universe on a never-seen-before scale.
So the never-seen-before scale bit makes me think they might be doing I can't remember the name of it, but you know the 40k game where everything is a much smaller scale so that you can have these ridiculous armies. Yeah. Makes you think that maybe they're doing more of a sort of grand scale combat thing, because obviously Infinity is like a skirmish game.
Yeah, with miniatures games, when they use the word scale, it's like, are you just using that in terms of the traditional use that most people would say scale, or do you mean literally the scale of these models? Because it's got quite a different meaning in wargaming generally. But also, if it's a board game, it might just mean big, chunky, robot miniatures that you play a board game with. Do they go the other way, and it's like an Adepticus Titanicus kind of thing? Adeptus Titanicus?
Almost robots, but they're actually normal size sort of thing. Who knows? Yeah. So we'll find out more before this autumn when the crowdfunding campaign goes live. Mm-hmm. So there we go. That another teaser for a game that we know almost nothing about. Thanks, industry. Very quick one. Exit the game.
the series of escape room board games by the brands Marcus and Inca. Kenneth Spilder is winning, I believe. There's a Lord of the Rings one coming this autumn. So Marcus Brand teased it on Twitter. It's called Shadows over Middle-earth, not to be confused with Shadow of Mordor, the video game.
Shadows over Camelot or
yeah. There's also a Return to the Abandoned Cabin, which is a follow-up to the original Exit the Game chapter, I guess, or installment, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So
you go back to the abandoned cabin and you find a goat just living in there.
Just living.
That's it.
Can't get out.
That's an official exclusive for Dicebreaker. Can confirm there's a goat in there.
Yeah.
So Marcus teased this on Twitter last week, and then Brett Spielbox, the German board game magazine, added a little bit more detail in a web article and suggested that the players will be protecting Frodo during the events of the Lord of the Rings. So whether that's the whole of the Lord of the Rings or just a section, we don't know. And it's not clear whether you'll be playing as like members of the Fellowship or hobbits helping out Frodo, or whether you'll just kind of be like unseen forces guiding various objects around. But Exit the Game is a great series. Those games are really good. I think Loli's spoke about them a little while ago.
Yeah, somebody's got to stop Frodo from falling over all the time. So
yeah,
and you got to have, was it Lampus bread?
Lemnis bread.
That's the one.
One bite will fill your whole stomach.
Yep.
It's good stuff. I think they have a recipe for Lemnis bread somewhere.
I would eat, even if it filled your own stomach, I'd probably eat all of it.
Well, that's the joke about the hobbits, right? Is they just eat it all because they're constantly hungry.
I am a hobbit.
Second breakfast
Hobbits are basically
and so on.
Skaven in the Tolkien world, aren't they?
Yeah, Tolkien was clearly inspired by Warhammer.
The Games Workshop,
Yeah, that's the way around. I mean, I'm sure
off,
that's what Games Workshop would love you to believe. Moving on to the very last one we have, which we'll get through. Monopoly. Hooray!
Yay!
It's back. It's back on the podcast.
It's back.
Ring out the bell. Monopoly's here. They're updating the Monopoly community chest cards, and they're doing so with a fan vote online, which is how, I mean, everything's engagement nowadays.
Yeah.
They did this, I think, previously for the player tokens, at least, where did the T-Rex make it in and the rubber duck and stuff like that? Where they just said, what do you want to see in Monopoly? Why don't you do our market research for us?
Yeah.
I hate this. I'm just going to throw that out there. They're so, like, I read, like, the ones we put up for the article with the, like, the splash image and then, like, the ones in the stock, like, they're so, like, saccharine and, like, cutesy and, like, hey, we're all just a loving community in, like, this game that is about systematic capitalism destroying everyone around the table.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh God,
which I think particularly rings hollow, given that in the last few years we've seen things like Monopoly for Millennials, which just came across really poorly.
Yeah.
And of course, going way back, Monopoly, originally invented by Elizabeth Maggie, stolen by Charles Darrow, was it? And never given credit by Hasbro. Just kind of, erased out of history for inventing the Landlord's game, which became Monopoly when Charles Darrow nicked it. So it feels weird to be like, hey, we're all in this together, when it's like...
It sucks a whole lot of ass, man.
Also, like, Hasbro are a heaving behemoth of tabletop money earning. And the fact that they're like, oh, hey, kids, we're on your side. Let's see what you think about the community chest. And we're just sat there going, you're basically Smog. Like, you're sat on a big pile of money.
Without getting too political, which, I mean, is a sentence for me to say, not really. But it is the most, like, neoliberal thing I've ever seen. Like, it's horrendous. I absolutely hate it. But I hate Monopoly anyway, so that's just kind of like...
It also just feels like one of those things of like, here's another reason for any number of families to rebuy a game that they already have for no real reason. Yeah. So in terms of details, so obviously community chest cards are the cards that generally give you or take money, give you money or take away money for various things. So like beauty contest is like the famous one, I think. Third place in a crossword competition, that kind of thing, I think pops up. Overdue bank something. So covering topics like beauty contests, holiday funds, and life insurance, there's no denying the Monopoly games, community chest cards are long overdue for a refresh, said Hasbro. And coming out of the tumultuous year of 2020, the term community has taken on a whole new meaning. Because that's what everyone... That's what the world was missing out of the back of this horrendous year with...
I'm melting right now.
Hundreds of thousands or not millions of deaths due to terrible governments and awful things. Tell you what we needed out of that is a new Monopoly. So yeah, you can go and vote. So I think you get 2 potential cards and you vote on your favorite. So Chase, who wrote the story, has picked out some examples, such as you help your neighbour bring in her groceries. She makes you lunch to say thanks.
Here's $200.
As well as meow. You knit cozy sweaters for the hairless cats at your local animal shelter.
It's $200.
Yeah, how does this actually work?
They don't make any sense.
So there's a focus on volunteer work, which in itself seems strange if you're then going to gain money from it, because typically when you volunteer for an organisation or a charity, you do so for free. Hence the word volunteer. Also Chase has pointed out that among the choices for the go directly to jail, do not pass go, do not collect $200 Monopoly dollars. Some of the potential choices are not returning a lost wallet, or playing loud music late at night as reasons to go to jail in Monopoly. It's only a matter of time in the UK. Thanks.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, look, they've done communist Monopoly, so now they can do fascist Monopoly.
Oh gosh.
Right, I need to cleanse my palate. Come on.
Yeah, let's have some lovely questions.
So I'll quickly throw on at the end. They're also doing, so to celebrate this, which is due out in the autumn, they're doing a charity game with celebrities. The first ever Monopoly Charity Classic, which will be live streamed. They'll play for a $350,000 pot, and their share will go to charity. So, that's a small bit of good coming out of...
although presumably they think they're going to get paid for this, based on the logic from the cards.
Yeah, and presumably there won't be a cut of the actual game going towards charity either. So, there we go.
Just be a one-off. And it'll be a tax write-off. But anyway, questions.
Yes. If you'd like to email the Dicebreaker podcast, you can do so. Meehan's still stuck on Mars, so we'll just get that. The communication delay every now and then. We're emailing Meehan on Mars. And if you'd like to email Meehan on Mars, you can do so at podcast@dicebreaker.com.
The job has crashed on Mars.
There's no gravity here.
I didn't even know it was spacefaring.
Is there gravity on Mars? Could you fly a helicopter on Mars?
There's gravity on all planets,
because that's... yeah, but as in, would it be comparable to... Yeah, would you be able to fly a helicopter on Mars?
Well
no atmosphere, so that would struggle as well, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's true. If you know physicists and or Martians,
science people...
email us at podcast@dicebreaker.com. Anyway, let's get on with this question, shall we? Wills, would you like to read this one from Roy, please?
Ooh, a chunky one. Hey all, love the podcast and all that you do. Smiley face. Thanks, Roy. A question I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on. I think there's plenty of examples of digital card games and board games that wouldn't translate well to tabletop due to things like constant automated computations and randomization that would be tedious or near impossible to do in the real world. Brackets like Slay the Spire, which I think Wheels discussed a few weeks ago. Yeah, I think we were talking about the fact that there's a tabletop version coming soon, and Toto was once again jumped up on the desk. Hello, bud. Beyond the joy of holding physical components and actually being with other humans, can you think of examples of the opposite phenomenon? I.e., a card game or board game where you enjoy manually doing the calculations or sums, and having it automated would detract from the experience. I ask because I recently got a physical copy of Can't Stop, which I had previously only played on Board Game Arena. Discovering the potential combinations of dice in the physical version instead of having them spelled out for you really increased the joy of the game for me. Sorry for the rambling question. feel free to paraphrase. Thanks again, Roy.
Thanks, Roy. It's worth shouting out Can't Stop, which Loli's taught Meehan and I way back when. And it's a great game, but I will say that I love Can't Stop because, as Roy kind of points out, it's you roll 2 dice and you decide to move pawns up different tracks which represent all the different results that you could roll. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that I love about the board is that the tracks, the length of them basically signifies the likelihood of that number being rolled. So 7, which is the most likely result, has the longest track because you're most likely to roll it, but that means you have to roll it more. Whereas like 1 and 12, which have the least likely, preserve Toto's modesty, which have the least likely chance of being rolled, I think they're just like 1 or 2 or 3 spaces. But it's such a kind of interesting visual representation of probability calculations, like Roy points out. And there aren't loads of games that I think spell it out like that and use it as part of the game itself. I think games where I do enjoy doing the calculations are things like Roll 'em Rights, because they're often simple, and that is kind of the game, is you roll your stuff, you add it up, and you plonk it in. It's just all numbers, but because it's the center of the game, rather than just, we're going to play the game and then do half an hour of maths at the end, it becomes fun. So yeah, I love Roll 'em Rights. I think Ganstrom Clever is a really good one of those. And yeah, that's me.
Yeah, I think there's a few games where like you can sort of get caught out by not paying attention, and that's kind of part of the fun, where it's like, oh goddamn, I miscalculated, like I did this wrong or whatever. Which, like, when we did our today we played of Welcome to on the YouTube channel, which you can find now. I thought I was sitting pretty, and then I realized that I'd made a block of 5 instead of a block of 6 buildings, because I literally just miscounted how many houses were in it, and it just completely screwed up my score. So like, I think there are a few different versions where like you do kind of miss out of some of the like slapstick comedy of like someone just completely screwing up the maths of something. But I mean, that there is also just a question of accessibility of like, not everyone's good at maths, me included. and so, some people have I can't remember the name of dyslexia, but the number version, dyscalculia, I think, for example, which can screw people up. So yeah, I think there's arguments either side of like there's certainly like fun elements, and certainly some games where Toto, no, oh my god, he's trying to drink out of a glass. He's gonna knock that over. But somebody else talk. It's good either way.
All right, Meehan.
Yeah, I mean,
anything come to mind?
I hate adding up, so because numbers, I'm not good at numbers, so anything that takes that burden away from me, to be honest, I'm quite happy with that. I suppose when they break it down for you, like Overboss does that, where it's like, okay, now we're going to score this, and then we're going to score this. I like that because it simplifies things for you. Yeah, I'm not someone who enjoys doing calculations and working out probabilities and stuff like that, because I don't have a very good brain for it. So yeah,
like you say, it shouldn't be the focus of a game. Like, a game shouldn't come down to your ability to do maths. I think it's actually one of my pet peeves, is games that rely on memory, particularly in discard piles. Like, everything should just be open information. Like, if someone's played a card that's visible to the table, everyone should be able to see that card for the rest of the game and be able to make judgments based on that, rather than playing into a face-down pile and trying to remember whether something got played 20 minutes ago.
Unless it's one of those like programming games where you're trying to predict or that kind of thing.
Yeah, or it gets shuffled, or people can take back out of the pile and things like that. If there are, mitigating factors that make sense, but just in terms of pure memory reliance, it's not fun. It puts so many people at disadvantage for no reason, really. Like, I don't have a great short-term memory, and like, it just becomes a frustrating experience rather than focusing on the game. And I think it's similar with maths, like the fact that things like Board Game Arena exist and allow people to experience those games without having to do the maths. Like, fantastic. Like, it's not a core part of that game experience.
And to be fair, like, if you're making a game where like the person who wins is the one who's best at memory and best at maths. As long as that's like
Very
the defining
obvious,
factor of
yeah.
the game. Like, you know, if you're playing like the maths memory game, then that's fine, isn't it? But like if you're playing like an area control game, but you keep getting screwed up because you have to do so many complicated equations to figure out like what you can do with your turn, then yeah, it does sort of like skew it away from the kind of the idea of what's supposed to make you good at the game. I will say that like I did this digital card games list, best digital card games, which you can watch on the channel. Played some Magic the Gathering Arena and has been having a good time with it. And I'll tell you for why. It's because I don't have to read all the cards as much and work out all the maths and figure out like what the hell this keyword is that I've never seen before, because I can just hover over it and it tells me. Like, there is like a massive amount of accessibility, especially for trading card games, when you do like give yourself a digital option. And it does mean, like, you know, one of the things I said in the script was you're actually better off learning Magic the Gathering through playing Arena than you are from like reading a rule book or whatever, because it's so complicated now. It's a lot easier for a computer to just tell you how it works, and then once you go to play the physical game, you'll be like, oh, I know how that works because I've been playing with it, you know. Like it just sort of removes some of the burden of information that a lot of people have.
Yeah, a good player reference. There's nothing better. I think it's one of the things with even physical route. Like the app is really good at telling you what you can do and why you can do it, but I think actually physical route, it does a fantastic job of, when you look at your board, most of the time you can tell exactly what you can do and what it does. Even though it is a complex game, there's a lot going on. Most of it is accounted for in the actual graphic design, so you don't have to check the rule book a lot. You know, there'll be small cases where you do, but it's a good graphic designer and a good kind of rulebook editor and rules reference editor can make just the world of difference.
There's also like this little phenomenon where like you'll play the digital version of a game that was originally a tabletop game, and the timing just feels weird and doesn't make sense. Whereas if you were playing with physical cards, it's like, all right, cool, I can't do that now because I would have discarded my hand at this point, or you know, something like that. When that becomes abstracted via making it into a video game, suddenly you're just like, sorry, why can't I do this? And it just like, it feels wrong a lot of the time, where it's you know, there's a very specific rule that's working in the background that you don't necessarily see because you're not actually learning the rules. You're just playing the digital version of the game, and it can make things feel a bit off and a bit like confusing, I think, where you're only really like able to play the digital game to its full capacity if you've already played the tabletop version or something, you know. Which kind of sucks.
Cool. Thank you for your question, Roy. Meehan, would you like to read this one from Haley, please?
Oh, I read a question that had my name in it, and Meehan's about to read a question that's got her name in it.
Hello. Nice. Hey everyone. I know Meehan's talked about terraforming Mars on the podcast before, and I'd like to know if anyone has played the expansions and how they thought it worked with the core game. My friends and I love the core game, but worry that the expansions could mess up the balance, as it sometimes happens with good games. Hope you're all doing well. Haley.
I'm using this as a bit of a springboard as well, because I thought it was a nice reason to chat about expansions that we do like. Because I feel like they're one of those things where, you know, expansions aren't necessarily a lot of the time. So expansions that do actually add something and feel like vital, or at least beneficial, are worth shouting out.
I've not played the expansions of Terraforming Mars. I've only played the core game. Matt, have you done it?
I've not. I think there's one of them on the app, right? I think one of them is available for purchase, but I've not bought it yet. But I'm enjoying Terraforming Mars, so I might well go in on it. Meanwhile, I patiently await all the root expansions.
Yeah.
Direwolf, if you're listening.
Yeah, Direwolf, put some of those
holding them to hostage.
Give us the river folk.
Yeah, we
playing so much root. I need those lizards.
This is a confirmation from Dicebreaker. Direwolf, we will buy those expansions if you put them on the digital.
Being Matt and Meehan.
Yeah, yeah, we will buy them because we play the heck out of that game and we want to experience the other faction.
there you go. That's what, 20 quid, which, as we all know, is about how much it costs to produce a DLC. So there we go, done, easy. Like it's easy
guaranteed
money, Dial.
Yeah, you've got at least 2 guaranteed customers. I don't see
that's
where
all
the
you
risk
need
is.
to sell a successful game.
Once
Nintendo sold 2 copies of Mario, they were quids in.
Yeah.
As we've already proven, I am a business expert.
That's true. That's true. We've proven it by saying it.
Yeah, we've proven it by saying it. So.
This is where they introduce loot boxes for Root to recoup the costs of the expansion. Look, you can make the cat wear a funny hat. Look, you can dress the cat like what's the latest thing in Fortnite? Ryu from Street Fighter, or
Lara
Post
Croft.
Malone, or like
Sigourney Weaver.
Post Malone. Okay, so seeing as none of us have played the Terraforming Mars expansion, I mean, Wills, I assume you've not. I don't think you've played.
I've not played Terraforming Mars.
Yeah.
So no, I'm even more in the dark, I'm afraid.
So Hayley, we're gonna answer a different question, which is related to it.
But has been springboarded from your question.
Yeah, well, thank you for your original question.
Yeah. If we do play the expansions, we'll let you know what we think. As for expansions that we do like and don't mess up the balance, what do you think, Mr. Jarvis?
So, we spoke about Arkham Horror before. The game that I have, I own all expansions for, is Mansions of Madness. But that's largely because it's story driven. I think some are much stronger than others. I think often the gameplay is the weakest part of Mansions of Madness, where it just is like, well, this is impossible, or we hit some invisible timer in the companion app, so now we have to fight for Star Spawn, which can be frustrating. Like, some of them are definitely weaker, but that's the game where my wife and I, like I say, I think they were annual, so it was one a year, and they were always around Christmas, so every Christmas we would pick up Mansions of Madness expansion, and that's what we'd play over the Christmas holidays. So they have a soft spot in my heart. Root is a game that I am after the expansions for. I own one of them, thanks to the kindness of the team. I own the Riverfolk one, but that is a game where I am now set on getting the expansions, and I think they've always seemed very well considered for a game that is very finely kind of balanced around how those different factions can interact. I think that's it. I think that is about it. Like, I've picked up a few like trading card games and whatnot. Picked up a few. Oh, Eldritch Horror. Tell you what, Eldritch Horror I've got a couple of expansions for.
Yeah.
But they bloat it significantly to the point where my wife and I went to play it a few months ago, opened up the box, saw like 4 different game boards and 3 different rule books, and we're like, we'll play something else.
Yeah, I mean, I would say if anyone's going to play Eldritch Horror, you're already committing to the bloat anyway. You might as well bloat it up a bit more. Just go...
Bloat it up!
Bloat it up!
But yeah, I think the difference between that and Mansions of Madness is Mansions of Madness introduces characters and scenarios, and occasionally gameplay rules, but they tend to be smaller kind of additional things. Whereas the Eldritch Horror stuff is significant, kind of like new mechanics and rules that... Eldritch Horror, not a small game to begin with. Like you say,
I think they tend to add old ones for you to go up against, don't they?
Yeah,
who have different mechanics from them.
There's like a dream board and stuff like that, like the Dream Realm.
Yeah, there's a Dream Realm.
It just adds a lot. Like I tend to be more for expansions that add almost, I guess, like replacement content. So it's like, oh, you can play as these different characters instead, rather than just piling on more and more stuff.
Yeah, so what I was going to say is my favourite kind of expansions are the ones that give you a different way to play the same game. So like one example is we mentioned the that run of Macro games with Inish and Sigley's and Komet. Sigley's and Komet have some really cool like expansions that are really quite innovative, I think. Sigley's has one. This one's not quite as innovative as the other, but it's still quite cool. Because it's an all versus all war game. It gives you a map and a set of rules to allow you to play as 2 teams against each other. So you're like on an island each, and you're sailing across the ocean to fight, which is quite cool. But Komet has one that I've not tried yet that I do really want to give a go, which is bonkers. Where instead of playing 5 people all against each other, you instead play up to 5 people co-op against one person who plays as like the bad guy,
Oh, that's cool.
who is absurdly powerful. So you can only beat him by all working together and fighting. But the funniest thing about it is that I'm pretty sure the person who plays as the bad guy has purple miniatures, so you kind of end up being Thanos essentially. But like, there's like loads of like really fun, wacky things that you can do with it, where it's like you can steal people's order tokens and then use them against them and stuff like that, and like you get to play like an actual villain, which is quite cool. Because a lot of those board games where it's like, oh, here's 5 people versus one person's essentially just like the game master. Whereas in this one, you are playing, no, like, I'm a character. I'm playing, like, the other guy that you're trying to be. It's 1 versus 5 kind of thing. So that one looks really fun. I want to give that a go. But those are my favourite expansions, ones which, like, give you a new way to approach the game kind of thing. Without just adding more content, which is always a little bit like, nah.
Yeah. For me, it's Widow's Walk. Widow's Walk is the best expansion I have ever played. It's so good.
Providing dance moves there to that song for our listeners.
Yeah, it was very good. I loved it. I think Widow's Walk is such a fine example of how to do an expansion, because it's a Betrayal at House on the Hill, which is a game I'm already very fond of. I know it can be controversial with some people thinking it's unbalanced. Widow's Walk does not solve that. I am fine with this.
It probably makes it worse.
It does. Is it Widow's Walk that changes the dice system?
Nope.
Or is that, maybe that's Legacy? Maybe I'm getting confused with Legacy.
As far as I know, Widow's Walk doesn't change any of the fundamental mechanics of the game. It just adds...
Oh, sorry, I got onto the door very quick. I'm very sorry.
1:30. I'm just going to type that in.
Hello, sorry about that. That was
I made
one
a
task
note
I was
on the
given.
Slack channel.
It's like Sarah's like, my mum's birthday present is turning up. Please receive it, otherwise, bad times.
Right. Okay. We'll go back to it. Yeah, it doesn't change any of the fundamental mechanics of the game. It just adds a new area to the kind of map, the tile map, and it like introduces a whole new bunch of scenarios for you to play through, which is great because like the main draw of Betrayal are the scenarios, and those scenarios are all written by people like outside of, you know, the publisher and the main designers of the game. They literally just hired a load of really interesting and great writers to kind of just go buck wild with whatever they wanted to do. So there are some really intriguing, you know, scenarios that you can play that are just so different from the cool ones of Betrayal. Because Betrayal has just like a very pulpy horror vibe where a lot of it's like, here's some spiders, here's a giant monster thing, here's Frankenstein's monster, that sort of thing. Whereas these are a lot more do whatever you want with it. And some of them are like okay, but others are just really interesting, and they just play with the kind of system of the game in really, really cool ways. And I think that's why it's such a good expansion. Because it doesn't bloat things either, because you've only played one scenario at a time. So it's not like you're playing these things on top of the others.
Yeah.
Agreed. I think it's really good.
Expansions like that, yeah.
Yes.
It's not like, okay, you're playing the normal game, but now you need to learn these rules, and now you need to learn these rules.
No.
It's just like, no, you're just playing the game differently now. You know?
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you for your email, Hayley.
Yes, thank you.
And we will call it there for this week's Dicebreaker podcast. Before we leave, very quickly, Wills, what's coming up on the video side over the next week or so?
Well, Matt, we have got we've got a slew of hot content coming your way, as always. So we spoke about it before, hoping to get that Let's Play of the new Summoner Wars demo up this week. That may move again, who knows? We've got a lot of sort of like things that are in the works this week that may or may not happen this week. So a couple of videos that we're sort of waiting on, and not waiting on, but you know, sort of we need external people to come help us to film them. So we might end up changing it around. So we may or may not have done a Summoner Wars playthrough. We may or may not have done a painting stream. Podcast would have been the day that you're watching this, hopefully. And then on Saturday, we're hoping to have a new string of RPGs come out, which will not be Dungeon Breaker. It will be just like a short series whilst we sort of like adjust to the gap and stuff like that. Whether or not that happens is up in the air. But then on Sunday, one piece of content that I can confirm is coming. Our lovely Mr. Matt Jarvis did a really wonderful interview with Cole Worley, the designer of Root, which we've been talking about, and John Company and Pax Pamir, a very, very well-established and very, very good designer. Matt has been talking to him about a few things for an event, and we're going to see that live on the channel soon. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Next week... who knows?
Yeah.
Life is a roller coaster.
It is. You just got to ride it.
Thanks, Ronans. So like Will said, I spoke to Cole Worley for Tabletop Gaming's virtual spring showcase, but we'll have that live on the YouTube channel afterwards if you didn't catch it as part of the event. It was really interesting. It was a good, fun chat. About Oath, mainly. We just chat about Oath, which sounds like a fascinating game that I want to play a lot, but it's coming out soon. But meanwhile, over on Dicebreaker.com, we already have up, but I'm going to plug it because it's a really good story. Chase wrote about the Warframe-inspired RPG Frame, which was kind of pulled off of Kickstarter after just kind of like a really kind of sad series of events kind of from the community pushing back against this small indie designer and creator kind of for no real reason, because it wasn't kind of taking art from Warframe, anything like that, but it was accused of kind of ripping off the video game.
Despite being directly inspired by Anne.
Yeah, like it was very upfront about how it was inspired, but none of the art, none of the lore was actually directly taken. So that's a really good piece. It kind of goes into kind of in depth about what happened there. Hopefully this week, Alex Meehan, you've written about Dead of Winter and why it's a great game if you're looking for something to take that kind of next step after kind of like more simple beginner games, kind of step up to something slightly more complex, get involved with different mechanics and so on. I'm looking forward to that very much. I'll also plug over on Eurogamer, if you've not encountered them yet, we have a series of Dicebreaker Recommends, the latest being on Patchwork, which is also by one Alex Meehan. So you can catch those over on Eurogamer. So head over there, but then come back to us, because also, we want you as well. Don't go over to that video game lot.
Yeah, because that's all the board game content they get. We get
we also have Jason Coles wrote last week about Magic the Gathering's crossovers, so the upcoming crossovers with Lord of the Rings and Warhammer 40k, as well as the slightly more distant The Walking Dead crossover and what that could mean for the future of Magic the Gathering. We have a piece coming up on, I've forgotten the name of it. Emmet, I believe, is the tabletop RPG as part of an anthology of games inspired by the experience of being Jewish. And we've had a fantastic freelancer called Rhea write about that, which should be up very soon. We have a lot of other things coming up. We have a Forgotten Waters review, in fact, from Charlie Phil, who has written that up. And yes, he basically echoes my feelings about it so far, but I haven't played it nearly as much for review. So it's a really good review. But for now, that's us. There's a lot coming up. Check out youtube.com/Dicebreaker, obviously, for the wonderful videos from the video team. Check out Dicebreaker.com. We have... it's ended now. We did have a sale, so I won't plug the sale, but you can still grab Dicebreaker merchandise, as always, from dicebreaker.myshopify.com. Hopefully we'll have some more stuff in the works very soon. Well, soon. Let's not say very soon. It's in the works. It will be up when it will be up, but we'll have some more stuff before the year is out for sure. But for now, that's been the Dicebreaker podcast. Thank you for joining us, Michael Wills Whelan.
Thank you. Those of you who are watching on YouTube will see that I'm being swallowed by the sun, so I guess I'll never see you again.
It was nice seeing you, Wills, as you disappear into your new life as the Star Child. Alex Meehan, thank you for joining us.
Joining Kiss.
Thank you for joining Kiss. Wills is off to be Star Child. Alex Meehan is off to be Gene Simmons or one of the most terrible members.
Yeah, I'm Gene Simmons.
I like the idea that Gene Simmons is the pseudonym.
I'd also like to congratulate Toto on finally getting into the guest room of Will's flat. So well done to you. You're a good lad.
I've been Matt Jarvis. Thank you for listening. I hope you stay safe out there. We will be back next Friday with another Dicebreaker podcast. But until then, have a lovely day. Bye-bye.